The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw.
Sprott Shaw Community College since 1903.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Virgin Radio 95.3. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
Tonight on Pia.
These women who have children and don't expect a father to hang around or don't want a father to hang around are doing their girls a huge disservice.
There's not an emotion. We're not attached to people anymore. We're attached to a thing, a song. Song's over, gone.
We constantly monitor the time that they spend on the computer.
Maybe it's because they've been completely overloaded with all this information.
When I look back, it was good, but back then, it wasn't.
This is going to be fun.
Kids today are incredible. I am constantly amazed by all the brilliant things they can do and how fast they can do them. They're a completely technological generation with instant access to more information than the world has ever seen. That information goes broad, but does it go deep? Is social networking replacing social life? Is the future going to be completely different as the virtual world becomes more important than the real world? Baby boomer parents, myself included, happily spoiled our kids. And we could do that, you see, because we built our careers at a time when jobs were plentiful. We wanted our children to never be unhappy. We wanted them to be creatively fulfilled. Well, basically, we wanted everything that we wanted but didn't get from our parents. But did we really do them any favors by protecting them so much from the harshness of life? To understand kids today and to imagine what their future is going to be like, let's look backwards first to when their parents were kids.
I was raised by a single mom, but I think that she instilled in me that I could do anything, everything.
I come from a family that was, I guess if you're calling it a broken family, divorced at a very early age, but they both had, different involvements in my life, and I still felt the parentage. I still knew that dad, don't cross dad, and I like that.
I went to school at Prince of Wales High School. Prince of Wales High School is right in the middle of, kind of right in the middle of Shaughnessy. So a kid coming from Dunbar, from a single mom, being in mix with a bunch of kids from Shaughnessy, who kind of knew exactly where they were going to end up and how much money they were going to make by the time they came out of the birth canal. I had to, I was not going to be pushed under by them. I wanted to not only beat them, but pass them.
What was I going to be? Who am I? I've got to make X amount of dollars by the time I am. I mean, I had all these in my mind, all these determinations. Some of them I never achieved. And I was going against my spirit, which is la 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 la. I'm free-flowing, basically. I'm a fluid kind of person, and it was just unnatural.
I was so intense. You see, but I didn't know I was intense. You don't know when you're intense that you're intense. I'd say things to my mother at a really young age, like, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Well, she would infuriate her. It was in the 50s.
One of the things I worry about today is whether or not kids are getting enough physical activity. Because of the perceived and real dangers of our world today, parents are afraid to let their kids have the freedom to roam and play and explore. Now, this is a change that has happened in one generation. The parents had personal physical freedom. Their kids do not.
We are always in sports, and we always are trying to get those bragging rights from each other, right? And we get together and I broke your record the other day or something like that. So it was kind of, we just grew up, playing in the fields, running, playing baseball.
God knows we went and played. Yeah, we played baseball all day. We played hockey all day, but we made up the rules. We weren't supervised. We didn't have uniforms.
My brother was at an all-boys school, and I think they spent sort of 7 out of 8 hours of their school day outside.
We were in sports, and I was allowed this much TV, and I was monitored, I guess, a bit, and there was still that sense of, don't cross the parent, because there's ramifications, and if you don't do what you're supposed to do in school, there's ramifications. So I think that you're taught, not so much karma, but in a sense, what your actions will have consequences.
Young people's youth night, pray night, Sundays was like Sundays started at 9 o'clock for me, and church would go till about 1 o'clock or 1:30. So I was playing baseball at that time, so I had to sneak out the window at the church, go to the bathroom, sneak out around 12 o'clock if I wanted to play baseball. So I used to sneak out just about every Sunday.
We had Nintendo. It was, it wasn't all consuming, and I had a trampoline that I spent hours on. You were active, and you had friendships, and they were personal, not texting. It was just a different world.
When I look back, it was good, but back then, it wasn't.
What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and everything nice. What are little boys made of? Slugs and snails and puppy dog tails. Well, that's what the nursery rhyme said. But we live in an age of gender bending. Oh yeah, the alpha male still dominates government, business, war, and women have been removed from the shelter of the hearth, and they're expected to work like men. And men have been given a shot at the hearth. Remember when John Lennon was the first celebrity house husband? So, we live in a society with unprecedented levels of gender equality. How are boys and girls adapting?
I look at my nephew, and he's gorgeous, and girls, and he's 13, and they're running after him. So I think it's a very personal thing.
The geeks and nerds had the milk bottle glasses and the bad raincoats, and they hung around in little clusters at school in the library, and we all avoided them like the plague. You look at these emo boys, and they look fantastic. They've got the lopsided hairdo, the old kind of Human League thing. They've got the skinny jeans. They've got the attitude. They look like they've never seen daylight.
That's true about the boys, that generation, whether that was a generation that we tried to entertain them with video games, and they learned to count watching television as opposed to doing other things.
I am really amazed that they are a lot less promiscuous than we were.
I knew that people that were in grade 8 or 9, even grade 7 were having sex. I knew that. It just didn't interest me, so I didn't even think about it.
Sexuality, it's so layered. It's complex. And I think a lot of people deal with the generalities of it.
We didn't have all that kind of bombardment with TV shows with women with fake breasts with their boobs out. There was that very clear differentiation between Playboy and then regular women. That there were the sex symbols and then there were the ordinary women, whereas that's all blurred for our girls. But they don't seem to be as promiscuous as we were. Maybe it was because it was such a novelty for us that we were all rebelling against our parents. But the friends of mine that have got 15, 16-year-old daughters, they have boyfriends, they haven't been having sex. They're not taking hard drugs. We seem to be terrified that they're going to, and they don't seem to be. They're not drinking the way that we did when we were 14, 15, 16. So it's really interesting. They seem to, maybe it's because they've been completely overloaded with all this information, and they've seen the Lindsay Lohans and the Britney Spears and all these celebrities completely falling apart, that they're not doing that.
The young women, and again, my daughter's 24, very empowered. I think this generation of women is going to be very exciting because we've empowered them. We've said that, from day one, you can do everything, dear. You can do all those things. And you know what? They've listened.
I think women are winning, and I think it's a real shame. I don't think men know where they stand in society anymore. And I think that men are having an identity crisis. And I think that we are completely responsible for this, and we deserve to give ourselves a good slap upside the head.
I think that's right. We may find a generation of boys that may take a little while to get out of their basement with the Nintendo games and get out into the real world. But again, the women, this young group of women, I think, are leading the way.
These women who have children and don't expect a father to hang around or don't want a father to hang around are doing their girls a huge disservice. And they're going to end up being single parents. And they're doing their boys a huge disservice because their boys don't know how to behave. They're becoming too feminine. They're becoming too emotional. They're becoming too needy. we've got all these boys that don't understand that it's okay to be a boy. It's okay to run around the classroom and to be really physical and to need to go to recess and to need to touch everything and do experiments and manhandle things and break things and take things apart. Because that's what boys do. But they're expected to learn how girls learn. They're expected to sit in neat rows and write notes and pay attention and be passive, and that's not what boys are about. So we're basically taking every masculine quality that boys have and we're making them feel guilty for having those qualities. And I think there's going to be an enormous backlash. I think these men are going to wake up and suddenly they're going to hate women and they're going to become more chauvinistic than Russell Crowe.
They may come out all right, the guys in the end, because the computer world has kind of changed a lot of those things.
My son is a male, so he's behind a female, how they grow up. But you know, he's finding his way. You got to find your way. And I'm really proud of him because he can go out there, he gets hired to go do jobs, he busts his ass, and people come back and say, this guy works his ass off. That's great. Okay, my daughter's going to come out with decent marks. Marks are going to be good. I still don't really know whether she knows what she's going to do, but she's getting these experiences. You know, she worked on the Olympic Games. She works over in London for Live Nation when she's in the summertime. So she's gathering up all this stuff, and then they're going to have to make a choice. But it's going to be interesting to watch.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Virgin Radio 95.3. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw.
Sprott Shaw Community College since 1903.
High school has always been a tough social experience. We all did things that we probably regretted later. But nothing can compare to what happens to kids today. For example, what about the girl who sexted her boyfriend a cell phone picture of her naked breasts and then found that picture all over the internet? What strange new reality is this? Kids today have to be very tough and resilient to survive the explosive world they live in.
We go to socialize, and it's not social, it's desensitizing. Loud music, what are you wearing? You know, what do you smell like? It's so outside of who we are right now.
They're doing this and doing that. The attention span's like a gnat. And you see, my daughter, I sit there, she'll say, Dad, this is a great record. You got to hear this new record by Kanye West. Bang, in it goes into the slot. Okay, I'm listening to it on the slot, a CD that she's burned for nothing, puts it in the slot. I'm listening to, I get into it, I'm 45 seconds into the song, I'm getting into it. Wasn't that great? Now this is better, bang.
Making eye contact with somebody and saying hello, it's an act of grace and love. You don't have to get into that person's life. You don't have to love them forever. You don't have to know them. You just have to acknowledge their presence now.
There's not an emotion. We're not attached to people anymore. We're attached to a thing, a song. Song's over, gone. So people, these acts are wondering, why can't I sell tickets? Well, these people aren't invested into you. They bought one song on iTunes for $1.29. That's it. They don't know what else you do. They know that song. They like that song. And if they haven't picked up on that song, any more songs, then why am I going to see that guy's got one song and got the song?
Kids need to be inspired. I would like to see on television programs for kids that enhances all the wonderful things that you hear these kids are putting together, you know, drives for Haiti or drives for, you know, they're doing these amazing things, but we don't focus on that.
There's going to be, in about, I predict, in 2,000 years, people will, if we're still here, will revert back to and we'll have thumbs. Big thumbs. Words will be obsolete.
Parents try to control this massive flow of unedited information, usually not very successfully. So we've got to believe in the upside. the enormous progressive, educational, evolutionary potential of the internet, that it's going to be worth it for the kids who make it through the minefields and master this new way of living.
We constantly monitor the time that they spend on the computer. Probably don't monitor it well enough.
I think you've got to monitor on some level the internet, because I think that there's just, that scares me. That whole thing scares me.
We've gone through the growing pains of, you know, where do you allow them to have a computer down in their room or that sort of thing. And right, the setup we have now is that from the kitchen, you can see the computer screen that they're working on. Even having it in the next room, but around the corner, you never know, you know, what they're going to be using it for.
There's images of these teen stars that are, you know, I mean, gosh, they look like they're 30, I mean, it overwhelms me. I can't imagine being a kid and then having all the issues that you have with your body and your image and your, you know, sex and all these crazy things and drugs and alcohol, and how do you manage that?
I think the interesting thing about this, the new world of the internet, is there is a little bit of social community to it, whereas television wasn't. You know, television was just sit and watch. I mean, sometimes you'd sit as a family when you had one TV.
The internet opens them up on a global scale that I've never, I mean, some of them are studying cultural things that in school, when I talk to them, that blows my mind. I said, really? You did that in school?
And then we've moved into this new world of the internet where people do interact with it, and they interact with people on the other end. And I think that may in the end work out okay, because we now have a group of people that want to learn, that want knowledge.
It's such a powerful tool. It's so useful for them in school and in so many different ways, and exposing themselves to, you know, different environments and getting a more broad, worldwide understanding of things. I think that on so many ways it's great.
I think they're so smart, and I think if the biggest problem all the young people have is because of this bombardment is focus. But if they ever get focused, and when they do get focused, it's terrifying what they can come up with.
It seems like everybody has an opinion on raising kids today, so it's no surprise that our very own super bad super dad, Patrick Malia, has something he wants to get off his chest.
Teenagers are out of control these days. They have no respect for authority. They're oversexed. They don't plan for the future. That statement could have happened today, 70 years ago, 20 years ago, 500 years ago. I don't know when it was that adults decided that teenagers need to act like adults. I don't know, did they have teenagers 500 years? Nope, just child slavery. Okay, well, whatever. What I'm saying is this: there's nothing wrong with teenagers today. Ever since the time of Cain and Abel, teens have been a little out of control. You remember Cain and Abel? Hey Cain, what's up? Is that a knife? Oh, is that? Go! They say teens are oversexed. It's sexting, the internet. They don't know what they're doing. They're out of control. When did this happen? When did we start projecting our inadequacies onto our children? It's not like in the 60s during the sexual revolution when teenagers were, oh, wait a minute. When we were in high school, we didn't have the internet and we didn't have sexting or cars or fire. Back in those days, if you wanted to be naughty with a girl, you had to draw it out. Here's a reasonable facsimile of my man parts. Nowadays, you've got sexting. And I think it's getting a little bit out of control. Not the sexting, but the way adults are treating it. Teenage girls are actually being charged with child pornography for sending photos of themselves to their boyfriends. I don't think that's what child pornography was meant to cover. I can say all this without fear of reprisal because I've got a son and a daughter who I'm very sure are going to grow up, be chaste until they're married, do exactly as they're told, and plan for their futures from the age of 12 and up. You know, like a good teenager should. Until next time, I'm Patrick Maliha, and this is the Maliha Minute.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw.
Sprott Shaw Community College since 1903.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Virgin Radio 95.3. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
The most important decision you'll ever make is to have a child. Of course, it wasn't always a choice to have a child, but in this era of Planned Parenthood, we have time to think about it ahead of time. Ideally, this child represents the love between the parents, and each parent dreams about the kind of child they'll produce and how they're going to raise this little person. Well, we all learn pretty quickly after we have the child that we have a lot less control over our children than we thought. But still, as parents, we do hold the emotional health of our children in the palm of our hands. The results are in. Statistics show that kids in North America rank #1 in the world for self-esteem, and I think that's a good thing. Our guests weigh in on what it takes to be a good parent.
I think it's very tough for kids today, much tougher than us. I think they're bombarded with stuff all the time. Don't know which way to turn, left or right. We only had a couple paths to go down. They can probably go down 100, okay? And the choices they have to make on a daily basis are unbelievable compared to the choices we had.
I look at my brother and his wife, and I see, well, why did they have the success raising their kids? Because their kids are amazing. And I honestly think because they are just darn good parents. They are totally immersed in their children's lives, although they both work. You know, and it's very interesting. They do everything together as a unit, and the communication is very straightforward. Very honest, very open. It reminds me of my upbringing a lot.
With Polka Dot Door, we didn't really speak down to them, hi boys and girls. It was like a conversation.
I think monitoring, I think inspiring your kids, giving them something to do, maybe limiting the exposure to the negativity that's out there. I don't know how many tsunamis they really need to see at this point, or, you know, there's so much, we're inundated all the time.
It's neat that I've always been able to talk to my kids.
We all in our life should have someone or some people that we recognize that recognize us, that help us along the way.
You can't replace parents.
My mother was busy raising children, you know, and that's a talent in itself. And she took the job very, very seriously. You know what I mean? Like, seriously.
My wife, Catherine, stays at home, and we homeschool the children.
I think there's a value to having abusive parents and being unpopular. I'm beginning to see the kids are always being driven everywhere. The parents have filled all their time. They get whatever they want. Mommy wants to be their pal. You never hear a sign of discipline. These kids are going to be big fat losers.
Well, they've done a lot of studies with identical twins, you know, who have the same genes, who are reared separately and have had very, very different backgrounds and child rearing experiences. They end up the same.
We've got all these single mothers who are saying that men are redundant, that you don't need a man.
Awareness is the key. No matter what happens, if you're aware of something, you can change it or you can move on. If you're not aware, you just stay where you're at and just keep on doing the same wrong thing or whatever that might be.
Having a daughter, the relationship that my daughter has with her father is the first love affair that she has, that she's going to have in her life, and it's going to define the relationships that she has with men as she goes through life, because he treats her so spectacularly. She's not going to allow men to treat her badly because she knows that isn't the way that women should be treated.
It seems that child rearing is not nearly as important as we used to think it was. The suggestion, at any rate, of some of this work was that genes make up about 50% of what happens to a person in their development. Another 40% maybe comes from their peers, and then maybe 10% from their parents.
A parent's job is to make your kids want to leave. You know what I mean, to a certain degree.
At the same time, we're not letting the children have their own lives. Everything they do is scheduled and organized. You know, they can't go play.
There's stabbing at parties now, and I think that's, you know, this is insane. Stabbing at parties, I never heard of that when I grew up. You know, ever. And I don't know how we fix it.
We are really bad as humans in estimating risk.
You know, this generation of kids that everyone wins the prize, you know, there's no losers, and you kind of that protective bubble, as you say, from the parents.
This risk that we can't let our children walk to school and back because they might get kidnapped or whatever, apparently is just like minuscule. You know, it's like they're more likely to be hit by lightning while being walked with their parent than they are to be kidnapped. On a sunny day, by lightning. I mean,
you know, it's tough as a parent because you want to protect your kid, but you know, you have to let them live for sure.
Don't worry about worry. Stop worrying about worry.
In some instances, you hear people talking about when they want to time the baby to be born so that it's going to be, you know, when it goes into kindergarten, it's going to be more mature than the other kids and exceed better in school and in sports. And, you know, you see some of that kind of overthought.
It just seems so organized, you know, that they don't get to figure stuff out.
Inspire your kids, get involved with your children, and get them involved in activity.
Be frugal with yourself, generous with others, and it's all about the education. So I wanted to make sure that my children, my daughters, were really well educated, and in fact they have been, and now that they're out of school, I can buy a new toothbrush.
So, are the kids all right? Have we made our case strongly enough? Many people think that this generation represents a giant step forward for human evolution. That's because of their total immersion in technology, their ability to access information, and the possibility of creative expression without years of training. This means that within their lifetimes, they have the capability to evolve society much further than any previous generation. Will they live up to this potential? Well, I think they're going to do amazing things. And finally, we as parents will have vindication for our child-rearing experiments. Thanks to our guests for sharing their stories, and thanks to you for watching. I'm Pia Shandel.
Pia would really like to know how you feel about the show. Please email us your comments at pia@thepiashow.com. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Virgin Radio 95.3. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw.